So we have, I think, the dubious distinction of sitting between your lunch and this session. With that, I'll do a quick round of introductions, self-introductions by everyone. And we can start with you.
Yashish, Dahiya. I run policybazar.com, which is an insurance comparison site.
Sorry, if I could interrupt, Yashish. Since we are at AdTech, could you tell us, give us a tweet on what big data means to you?
Not much, actually. We're still trying to figure out. I think we're fairly confident that in the next 6 months to a year, we have to learn a lot from big data and kind of make some conclusions for our business. And in case we did not do that, we would lose out in big time. But what we are going to do, we don't quite know yet. So that's where we are.
That was a Facebook post. I'm Sagnik. I look after marketing for Axis Bank. Tweet would be, it's the future.
Hi, this is Madan, Mohapatra. I take care of customer strategy for Future Group. In one word, it will be data jungle, which we are still trying to figure out what lies where.
Hi, I am Vyom. I look after BI CRM for ICICI Bank. The tweet would be finally bringing the I in the center of conversation of the IT. So that's the tweet, and exciting times ahead.
Hi, I'm Chetan. I'm the co-founder CEO of Vizury. We work with multiple marketers across Asia Pacific and Latin America in helping them unlock the value of the data on the marketing side. My tweet would be, most persuasive marketing is personal.
Wow. Okay, and I'm Tripti Lochan. I run VML, which is a digital marketing agency in the region. And my tweet would be the art and science of combining data within and outside the organization to draw insights that drive business decisions. Okay, with that, we have a fantastic panel today, guys. So write your questions down as we go along, and let's make sure we get as many questions in and make the gentlemen work for their lunch. Let's put some context into this discussion. I think data in the past was one of the 4-letter words that marketing agencies used. And they went to the trouble of actually separating it from innovative, creative-led ideation for mass media, which they called ATL, and very measurable direct marketing that had quantifiable results, which was called BTL. So that's how far away the CMO was from data. To today, when data is being used for marketing efficiency in a lot of organizations already, and if you look at some key innovations that have happened in this area, some examples that come to mind are Netflix. You know, Netflix, which was in the business of actually renting out, leasing content, became an original content creator because they mined the data of users as they were searching for preferences. So they were looking at what data, what preferences users were looking for in content, and they became original content creators, with House of Cards as being the series that they created without even doing a pilot. And they outbid HBO for this. Another very key example is TomTom, which is a telematics company, and they were in the process. They were in the business of enabling GPSs, and they used to keep getting random requests for their data till they realized that this could become a revenue stream for them. And now they have a revenue stream that is data derived. So you're looking at businesses that they've innovated so much that what was happening along the way has become revenue and real for them. Now, with this context, let's try and ask our panel, what is noteworthy examples of work in their industries where big data is concerned? So why don't we start with you, Chetan?
Sure. So I mean, there are varied applications of big data that we have seen. We work with about 600 clients now globally. But one of the examples that comes to my mind is a large airline based out of Middle East, and one of the programs that we sort of ran for them. So this airline essentially has about a few million users who interact with them on their website. They also have multiple promotional programs running, which are essentially linked to the seat capacity and sort of the fill rate that exists on the seat side. And in the world without a big data platform, what they would do is, depending on what are the sort of routes of other flights which were not filling up, they would go and buy offline media. So a print ad would come up every day, every week, saying these routes, these are the discounts running. So when we sat down with them and tried to understand what can be done in this context, so we actually combined these two programs, the media buying program and the sort of the seat capacity program and the user behavior program. And a program that we ran for them was, depending on the dynamic runtime signal that was available about the seat utilization across routes in the future, let's say 30 to 60 days, we would dynamically configure, let's say, discounts for them from the pool of discounts available and target those specific users interested on those routes with those ads. So for example, if, let's say, Abu Dhabi Mumbai route was full, there were no ads, but if Abu Dhabi New York was relatively empty, then there was a discount thrown to those users who were interested in that route. So that is one example that I can certainly share.
Could you tell us what business impact that had?
Sure. So one of the metrics that they would measure is the effectiveness of marketing, right? When they would buy the media in the offline world, it was spray and pray. I mean, I would see the New York Abu Dhabi ad and you would see it as well, and maybe both of us were not interested in seeing that ad in the newspaper. So the metric on which they measured it was the ad spent to the increase in utilization rate. And that what we essentially saw was there was about 2x betterment in terms of the output that they saw.
Wow, that's great. And that paid for their use of big data very, very quickly, I imagine. Yeah? Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, Sagnik, why don't you give us an example from the financial services category?
One of the ways that we are also using data per se, I would say that is a constituent to the whole big data platform, is also by social listening. So what our customers are saying about our product services and what kind of conversations are happening pertaining to various sort of industry level products and services is something that we are keenly noticing, and we are kind of monitoring them and trying to use it for certain early signals, if I may, to improve services, to improve certain processes. Those are things for which we are also using. So this is one dimension. There are other dimensions also where we are culling in the data of the customers and trying to give them meaningful offers as we go along. So that's something that as an organization we are doing.
And have you been able to put any metrics around this to see effectiveness or ROI?
Yeah, we run campaigns and we look at various matrices, including, so there are D2C campaigns that are run on which we look at various open rates, click rates, conversions, etc. And also in terms of our conversations, there are, on the social space, I think we measure it through various numbers, various matrices that we keenly sort of observe. We have various matrices, so I won't be able to give you one, this is something that we have been doing. And of course we are experimenting. And I think it's a long way ahead. So that's why I said it's the future.
Yes. So Yashish, you said you've not yet forayed into big data, but maybe in the industry, in your space, do you know of examples that would?
Well, most certainly. So we're using, what you would call slightly more advanced analytics or higher end data in at least two areas. One is to fine tune most of our brand spend. We obviously look at things like 10-minute response rates, etc., and we have various projections for what a particular ad is supposed to do for us. And we look at both its immediate response with mobile and desktop and kind of fine tune on that. I think the second and a more relevant example which we are cracking right now, is what you call retargeting. So essentially, what happens is people come to something like Policy Bazar, but only about 6 to 10% of those people buy. But these people were looking for insurance. They are in the next 6 months, I assume, a lot of them are going to buy insurance, and we can't be the only ones who kind of market them. On the other hand, the insurance companies really struggle to get relevant consumers to their site. So what we are doing is a program where we allow insurance companies to retarget these consumers, but we do it very sensitively. In the sense, I can of course get one insurance company to retarget our entire database, but that would be meaningless for the consumer, and eventually you'll have 30 insurance companies reaching out to the same consumer. So what we do in real time is a very quick assessment of which companies, which product is likely to convert with this customer most. And limiting the retargeting to about 2 to 3 companies at a time. And this is electronic retargeting, not telephone-based retargeting. But you suddenly start seeing that companies' adverts, mailers, etc. The metric we are putting around this is essentially what we call retargeted sales, which I'm sure the insurance companies figure out a way to pay us something for it. It may be a smaller amount than what we get paid usually, or maybe a higher amount. It depends, right? So it kind of compares with their own cost of acquisition. But this retargeting program is something that we are really getting fine-tuned about. Along with the retargeting program comes, we also have our own call center. So there are people who are trained in different products. So making sure that inquiry is handled by the most trained and apt person for that particular transaction is another one. But I think the latter is more straightforward than the former. Because in the former, you're actually making a call on how somebody else's ads or products are going to work in any particular example. So yeah.
So with this particular development, have you explored working with other industries which are related?
So we have a, I hope there's nobody from the government or the regulator here. We have a very strange regulation. We are not allowed to deal with any other industry. So let me actually just take one moment to make this, because I love to make this point all the time. So imagine 99 acres who could only make money for house sales, and that too was restricted, and they're not allowed to deal with any other industry either. So yeah, that's exactly the world we live in.
Right. What about you, Madan?
Well, like I said, it's a jungle for us. So we have been trying to explore and figure out small milestones to experiment and figure out how we should move about it. So one thing which I probably remember, which we did in the recent past, is that at Big Bazar we are never known largely for our baby care products. And but the environment was full of opportunities, and we realized that's a large growing category when there's so many babies are getting produced, manufactured, whatever you call it, every moment or every day. So that lies a business potential. And our baby care products standalone used to do decent, and so are the diaper business. So we said that how do we look at, and there are very really low cluster of consumers who are buying both the thing product together. So that's where the experimentation started. And while we could not do much about the baby care range per se, but we started investing our time, energy, and effort on the diaper business. And what we did is that we started analyzing those young moms who have been buying products which are baby care or a baby needs in the house, and try to make assortment of those products. And we tried to look at how many of them are buying diapers, how many of them not buying diapers from me. And if at all they are buying, what kind of diapers, what price range. Unfortunately, in the branded space, there are only few options of diapers are available, otherwise it's all imported. And in our store, we sell only the Indian brand diapers. So what we did, there are two opportunities it gave it to us. So we used this opportunity to increase our assortment, and we have introduced our own brand, private brand of diaper. And we started doing targeted communication through our loyal customer base. We have almost little over 20 million loyal customer base. And in 3 months, we saw our diaper business grew almost by 35%. That's the probably the success which we saw it in recent past, which I can talk of.
Were there any examples of in-store advertising based on user behavior that you had analyzed? You know, even walkthroughs around the store?
So we probably looked at a more conventional way of doing things. We believe at Big Bazar. Big Bazar is a marketplace. And what so in Hindi we have a kahavat, "Do dikhta hai, wo bikta hai." We actually started creating thappis of diaper in all the stores, and it's conscious. It's right on your face in the beginning, where diaper was on the last corner in the aisle and probably on the second floor on the corner. It came right in the front. That I think helped, coupled with the communication, the offer and everything, and we showcased the range of diapers which we had, which earlier we never had. I think all of them put together helped us in achieving the objective.
Lastly, Vyom, another financial services example would be great.
Right. So, if I think about the long range of how, I mean, since we're talking about big data, banking as a sector is completely centered around data and how data gets processed and how data gets used, right? So, if we think about the last 20, 25 years of innovation in banking, a lot of that innovation has come out of data-related, IT-related advancements. If you go back about in the 90s, algo trading on Wall Street has been around since the 90s, so that is big data at its core. Come now, although that stuff is very expensive technology, come now, technology is becoming more usable, cheaper, etc. And hence, uses like customer-facing technologies, which is understanding how customers are interacting with the banks, not just transacting, but interacting. So how many times does a customer, go on a website? How many times does a customer go on ICICIbank.com, and tries to research for a loan product, etc. So just the interaction information, even on a ATM, even in a branch, etc., that starts getting captured and then starts getting put to use, meaningful uses. I think that's the change that we are seeing across in how data is being utilized. And some of this stuff requires some of the low-cost technology to come to help, because Wall Street algo trading can work on very high high-end apparatus, but stuff like this gets a business case only when the technology is available at a price, and that's what's the change that we are seeing now around us, and that's what is causing all of these use cases to now suddenly start becoming feasible. Yeah.
Great. So that's across different industries. One of the things that I kept thinking of was how big data impacts us as consumers on an everyday level. And one of the things that it impacts each one of us, which I think all of you would have used, is smart routing. If you're looking from how to go from place A to B, it's so natural to pick up Google Maps or one of those applications which have started becoming preloaded on all our phones increasingly. So the smartphone penetration is going up 70% by 2020, and all these applications will come preloaded on those smartphones with GPS capability. And I read a statistic somewhere that said that in terms of global economy savings will be about $50 billion US, which today we accept as something very normal. So just fuel cost saving and the time spent, lack of time spent on moving, the saving of time. With that, I think the key question I'd like to ask the panel is about examples where big data has not only helped the enterprise, because we've heard the enterprise's version of it, but helped consumers, done something to make the consumer's life a better life or a happier consumer in some way. And this time, Madan. Or not. Maybe not. Sagnik?
Did I think of something?
You're also thinking. Okay, we'll take volunteers from the panel. Why don't you go?
in the same example, if you really think about it, so when somebody comes to us, he's basically looking to get connected to the best options for himself. if the heuristics are already telling us what are the best options for him or what people with that, his or her profile have selected, then you're going to kind of reduce his nuisance value quite a bit. He would be connected much faster to his options. So that is an clear value add as far as the consumer is concerned. On the second side, what we've just launched is a driver score app, which is our own proprietary technology that we've developed, where we're not doing too much. We're basically figuring out how much a person drives, how badly they drive. It's badly because it's basically checking how many kind of mistakes you make in an hour, etc. And on one side, it's advice to the person. But on the other side, if you are a safe driver, you start to get some clear benefits in terms of lower cost to yourself. Because so far, if you look at least motor insurance, which is the biggest component of general insurance in India, it's largely, you have this car, it is so old, you're based in Delhi, this is your price. That cannot be how the future will ever be, because I may have two cars in my house, one which I drive 300 kilometers a month, one which I drive quite often, and they're irregular drivers, regular drivers. So clearly, the safer drivers can start getting better options and better actuarial can happen. So I think, we're just at the beginning of that. We'll see how it goes.
Chetan, would you have a point of view on this?
One of the sort of things we see is, just following up on Yashish's point, is actually the whole sort of focus on personalizing the experience. And we see sort of 2-3 different use cases of this. So we work with a lot of retailers globally in multiple countries. And one of the technologies we see being increasingly adopted is the recommendation system. When, for example, you go to a site like, let's say, Yogu in China, right, or you go to Rakuten in Japan, companies are essentially building massive amounts of data about user experience on that channel across other channels, so that when you go back for the nth time to the website, one of the things that you see is that interaction is getting more and more intelligent, which means navigating through tens of thousands of products is being made much more easier for you as a user. And the metric that it impacts actually is the conversion rate. We've been in many of these markets for 3 to 4 years now. And one of the metrics we see is the conversion rate of the smarter retailers who are using it to actually drive benefits for the consumers, is growing maybe 10-20% year on year, and it's getting better and better.
So do you think in this case the key message is really relevance to consumers? Because if it's relevant, it's going to make them happier, make their life better, and benefit the enterprise as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is about relevance. It's about understanding the user based on the last conversation, the previous set of conversations, and then making it cross-channel. And we increasingly see that a lot of retailers especially are sort of being able to do this, at least on the digital side.
Excellent. My third question. Oh, sure. Would love to.
Something so it's about in the domain from where I come from. If you look at any of us, when you walk into a hypermarket, probably the best thing for us is to get a deal. Or for that matter, when you are moving in your e-space, the best thing is to get a deal. And quite often, you don't get the time, energy, or the width to visit through across all of them to see which is the one which is offering the best prices for the product which I'm looking for. And quite often, after you make the purchase, you feel sad. Oh shit, I lost. I could have been better off buying from this site or from this store than another store. What if there comes a ecosystem like which will not only help me see the pricing across the board and take a decision, and a smarter one will actually make with a proposition saying, listen, you come and buy from me, and if you match anybody which is going lower than my price, you bring it to my notice and I will refund that money directly to your wallet.
I think the hospitality industry was the first one to do that already with the best rate guaranteed campaigns that quite a few of them ran.
So that will be amazing for a consumer. He's assured of the probably the best deal at any point of time from any stores.
yeah, that is an interesting proposition, and especially as we see a lot of in-store digital searches happening, which is becoming a norm, especially in places like China. So you go online, you search for product pricing, then you go to store, compare, and at the store tell your salesperson, I'm getting this, and drive prices down. So interesting space for your industry there. Third question is around challenges that marketing and business leaders will face as they try to navigate through this space. Vyom, do you want to answer that one?
Sure. I think one of the challenges, while there's a whole lot of talk around social data, big data, external data sources coming into banks ecosystems, or for any other firm for that matter, there's this big challenge of identity that we still face, right? Which is to be able to offer any meaningful services, any meaningful conversation on social media, on any of the platforms. It's important to know who you're dealing with, right? In the offline world, one is more comfortable now with unique ID coming in, and KYC guidelines, etc. Whatever convenience, inconvenience they cause, but at least one is very well aware of the identity. In the online world, in the social world, one doesn't see things moving on that pace to be able to get there. Of course, there are workarounds to that. So, for example, if at ICICI Bank we launched the tablet-based account sourcing process, which was completely digitized end-to-end. And that was our way of trying to fix this problem of identity, wherein at least customers could give us a photograph of their KYC documents, we could take a photograph then and there and digitize the entire process end-to-end. But I guess one of those, how do I enable something like that on a Facebook? How do I enable something like that on a Twitter account, for example? So the problem of identity is, to my mind, one of the bigger challenges that we need to still get around.
And do you think, from a consumer standpoint, the idea of privacy is changing? Are people giving you more information about themselves than they used to in the past?
We see that happening a lot in the younger generation. So I guess that's either a demographic age or mental age, one of the two. But it's got to do with that, because we have very a deep suite of services and products around what you can do on social media at the bank, right? So ICICI Bank offers a whole host of transaction services on Facebook, on Twitter, etc. We see the take-up happening more in the younger generation, and of course, it's like I said, it's either a demographic age or a mental age, but that leads to the adoption of these services over the social media as well. The other point that we see is that the younger generation is definitely more comfortable with sharing, transacting on social media, on these platforms. At some point, though, I guess we will have to be careful around how much do we act on that information. So it's one thing to collect that information, one thing to know what is happening out there, but the other thing is to draw the boundaries and self-set boundaries around what you do with that information, because I think, like Yashish said earlier, or Sagnik was saying earlier, it can become a sort of a nuisance as well at times. So that's the place where I think one
if I can add to what Vyom is saying, I sometimes as a marketer feel that we are very excited about these opportunities, the incremental sales or the incremental sort of click-throughs that you will get, the ROI, etc. But what is it doing to the consumers? And that is something I think as marketers we need to always keep in mind. It shouldn't become spooky at some level. It shouldn't become, really invading your space at some level. You go to a certain website to do, just to check prices for travel, and for the next 14 days if you're served ads pertaining to that travel, then is it relevant? Or is it, kind of making me feel that I do not like this site? I think that's something which marketers will need to grapple with and kind of draw the line where it is the right sort of intervention that will add.
Absolutely. So I think one lesson to be learned is the whole NDNC wave to which the SMS channel went. right? So a large proportion of customers got themselves registered on NDNC, and hence one of the channels was effectively blocked out from a marketing perspective. So that puts us responsibility on our shoulders as marketeers to ensure that other channels don't go down that way, because there are a number of channels which are coming up, being developed, etc., but none of them should go down that way.
Yashish, did you want to add?
So, essentially on the privacy part, I find the internet, at least, or what's happening on the consumer side in India, there is a lower concern for privacy than in most other parts of the world. And, just the whole SEC A, B, C, the internet is not just about the SEC A+, etc. So from a revenue perspective, at least, as of now, privacy is not the biggest part that's driving. However, when I speak about challenges with data, see, as this data and analytics is becoming more and more powerful, some of the results coming out of it can be fairly conclusive. And I think at that stage, you need a very deep understanding of what was in the past called gut, or what makes sense. In the last 15 years or so, whenever I have seen data and gut clash, it's almost always been gut which has been right. And, I think what sometimes data and analytics can do is give a lot of confidence to certain decisions, which is actually dangerous, because those decisions could get made, and those decisions could get implemented, and those decisions will actually lead to disaster later. But it's just, so one of the big pieces we miss in data is causality and correlation. Correlation is not causality. And so various things, and I think it takes a higher evolved mathematical mind to kind of start understanding data, rather than kind of just believe it blindly.
Totally. Madan?
Yeah, what I thought I'll just touch upon 3 points of what probably the challenges or what the data can't do. I think the first point is some way it curtails your imagination. And what I meant is that when I look at data, I only probably at best I think incremental. When I'm talking a business growth point of view, when I have to really take an audacious decision of multiplying my business in a particular kind of business where the growing businesses, I think sometimes data doesn't help. You probably move out of the constraint of the data and the incremental mindset to think large. Just to give an example, which is probably what we did last year, we had a property called Bazar, which is very strong, and we realized it's stagnating. And when we started doing analysis and paralysis, everything, we realized at best, with increasing media pressure, offer, and everything, probably you can get somewhere between 30-35% growth. But somewhere within the leadership team, we said no. Probably with all this combination, we definitely can get 3.5-fold growth. And we went with that mindset, and we invested money, probably 4 times than the money which is that property deserves. And the result was in the first week itself is actually we touched 3 times of the sale which was doing in the previous week. And it plateaued at twice of the number which we were doing earlier. That's one point. Second is that when I talk the imagination, it also, sometimes we start copying insights from other market or from other instances without realizing probably it might not work. One of the standard, understanding and belief is that when you keep product impulse, so-called impulse product at the cash counter, like chocolates and all those things, they actually increases the sales. But in hypermarket context, we have realized it's not chocolates which are the impulse. It's more the female utility products, which is probably the napkins, probably some spoons, and which are typically used in the kitchen, on the household. They give the maximum traction in terms of impulse, not the conventional impulse of chocolates or confectionery products. And the third point which I wanted to mention is that while data talks about all transaction being an emotional economy, I think what it does not help us in understanding how to connect with the consumer. I think that's the big gap, which is probably the art part of our conversation has to come in. Our experience, our gut, that human touch needs to come in to build that connect. That's why probably you go back to your neighborhood kirana again and again, in spite of knowing that he is not giving you best price, because probably that's some emotional bonding which you have built with that kirana. So we need to move. We should understand that data can do is one of the business enabler. It may not be the enabler. It can do only that much what it should do. And rest, I think we have to add.
So I think that's a very, very interesting point, which leads us very nicely to the question that I wanted to ask, which is, we've been talking a lot about the science of big data. And what Mohan has just brought in is the art of big data. And I'd love to hear from Chetan to manage this balance between science and art of big data. What kind of an organization structure should exist?
Just sort of going back to the airlines example that I mentioned, for me, I mean, if I were to do A versus B of places where we see companies unlocking value from big data versus companies that are struggling, we see 3-4 very consistent trends in terms of the organization part of it. Number one is, I think, a CXO sponsorship. So because traditionally especially large companies are very sort of siloed in terms of decision making, in terms of authority, in terms of communication, in terms of IT infrastructure, systems and people don't talk to each other. So somebody at a CXO level standing up and saying, these are my sort of key business goals and I believe that big data is going to help me solve some of them, is very, very critical. So that's one part. The second part is cross-functional teams essentially sort of working together. In many of our clients, what we see is marketing, IT, legal, promotions, branding, CRM sort of groups, sort of multiple groups do need to come together to be able to make this happen. So having a consistent agenda across functions, across systems to be able to drive it is the second thing. The third thing is just sort of starting off with the goals. When an organization, a marketing function has a set of goals, an IT function has a set of goals, but this is something that requires sort of things to be cut across. So having a consistent set of goals defined and aligned to, and starting backwards from there is fairly critical. So these are the 2-3 things that we see from an organization structuring and organization setup standpoint that are the hygiene things required to unlock value from big data.
Just want to add one point on this is that the moment we shift our focus of looking at an individual as a data point to as an individual, I think the art part will be much more clearer than the science part. While all of us have been dwelling on the science part, it's all about the individual as a data point. The moment you can look that individual data point as an individual, then probably the art part will be much better articulated and you can probably plan your action accordingly.
And I think increasingly we'll find organizations where the CMO and the CIO need to start working much more closely together than they did. So we've got 2 minutes to summarize, unless somebody has anything key that they wanted to say.
I think keep the data with the CMO, not the CIO, is one thing.
Okay, so our 3 key conclusions that I'd like to summarize before we throw this open for questions is, the whole hype about big data needs to become relevant to a question that we ask ourselves, which is, so what? What does that mean for the customer? Why is it relevant? Before we get into a spinny, organization where we're just chasing big data for the sake of big data itself. The second one was to create a roadmap with an outcome in mind for the organization and then take small steps. As we've heard from the panel here, make small steps. Don't just get, over the top with the fact that you have to implement big data. We haven't had a chance to talk about costing and pricing and the investment, but the panel is available at lunch and you can, get hold of them to ask those questions. And I think the last point is to have the right organization structure in place, preferably the CMO, in charge of the big data initiative. Okay, with that, we are happy to take questions.
Hi, my name is Adarsh. I had technology for a company called Digital Quotient. So there are a couple of people from banking domain in the panel. So traditionally, banks have been known to use proprietary technology. Now with big data, are they continuing with that, or they are embracing open source?
So you're absolutely right, which is, bulk of the technology platforms are continue to remain proprietary, etc. Right. But again, like I said, I mean, there is if there is a huge cost arbitrage, if there's open source technologies which are doing similar work at a significant benefit in the price delivery equation, why not? I mean, we definitely we do experiment with some of those platforms as well.
Okay, thanks.
Excuse me.
This is Prasad here, and I am from MEC. I might be digressing a bit, but I have a question for Chetan. While we completely understand that technology is improving, and there are a lot of new innovations which are happening. However, do you at any given point in time fear? I would not call it as fear, but do you think that the way the consumer is turning, it's becoming a blind spot to the consumer on the offline medium, right? So similarly on the internet, there is a lot of technology, there are a lot of algorithms which are chasing the consumer wherever he goes, and maybe showing him the most relevant of the ad, right? But do you see that becoming a point of a dissonance for the consumer?
So I would probably just sort of answer it in two ways. The first part of it is when we look at sort of the digital ecosystem and draw a triangle, there are three stakeholders here basically. Number one is a marketer himself. Number two is maybe intermediaries like us, maybe it's Google, it's Facebook, so the guys who are sitting in between. And number three is the consumer, right? And when I look at the evolution in terms of the controls, the visibility that people have, or all these three entities have, yeah, at this point in time, consumer is probably the weakest in terms of being able to control his experience. To some extent he can, but philosophically when I look at it, he's the weakest. So one of the things we do see happening, especially for the digital medium, is more controls coming onto the consumer side so that his experience is richer than what it is right now. I mean, cookie deletion, unblocking of cookies is sort of one step in that direction. Opt-in for targeting is another step in that direction. Browsers becoming more privacy compliant is sort of another step in that direction. But we believe that in the next, let's say, 3 to 5 years, a lot more steps would be taken in that direction. So that's one way we look at it. The other way we look at it is, I think it's also a life cycle of a medium. I mean, when display ad started, the first display ad had a CTR of 10%, right? A click-through rate of 10%. But now the average CTR, click-through rate is 0.1 to 0.15% on an average if you look at it. So yeah, I think it's also a life cycle of a medium, and the medium would go through its share of sort of ups and downs, relevant and not relevant engagement, and it would stabilize at some point.
Thanks.
I'm Gurpreet from Axis. My question to Madan. We've seen that increasingly in e-com portals, in e-retailers, the consumer experience is getting richer and richer because of this data. I mean, every time in that ecosystem, for example, in Amazon.com or Flip.com, you go and you are recommended the products as per your previous behavior of the browsing behavior. So how you're taking up this challenge in the physical stores, because you're also getting a lot of consumers there, they're buying so much of products there. So how you're taking up this challenge, because you're facing the stiff competition from e-com portals. A lot of it's taking a lot of pie from you. How you want to safeguard it?
First of all, let me clarify. It's not that somebody is taking away share from the other person. Because if you know the modern retail penetration in India, it's still in single digit. Even that large markets are also, like Bombay, Delhi, they're also as high as 25-28%. So it's not that somebody is taking away from the share from the other person. It's together, I think the pie is increasing, and people are getting more and more into the consumption mode, which is good for all of us. To answer the second part, see, if you look at the mode of delivery, that's one, offline and online. But when you look at the consumer, put the consumer at the center. For him, it's the convenience. Whether if he is going to offline, it is for a certain reason, certain convenience level. If it is going for online, it's certain convenience level. So the core thought is convenience at the best price, right? If that is the thought, the biggest service to that customer would be, how do I make it delivery neutral? If I operate in a manner that whichever mode of delivery, whatever time, whenever the consumer wants, if I can deliver, I can give him the best price, I think that's what the consumer will want. So we are, as a group, to start with Big Bazar, we are working on in this philosophy, and through which hence we are looking at omni-channel. Okay, so if you are to answer you in the straight-jacketed way, there is no online or offline we are looking at. What we are looking at, the consumer convenience, and hence the mode of delivery is immaterial for us.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thanks very much. I think lunch is open. And get these gentlemen, you know what they look like during lunch. Thanks.
Thank you.